I'm about to drop a podcast on you, wholesome people. Welcome back to the Danny Flow podcast. It's good to be with you. This is episode 58. Go ahead and preemptively like and subscribe to the channel. So like the episode, subscribe to the channel. You can always go back and unlike it if you end up not liking it. You can always go back and unsubscribe. It's not like a permanent thing. But I mean, if you've been tuning in regularly because somehow you found me and you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, and just any of the audio versions, go ahead and leave me a review. That way you can help other people find the podcast. So let's get into it. What have I been thinking about lately? So I have been working part-time at an Italian restaurant since April of 2019. So I want to tell you the truth, right? Because I think we all have a sense of when someone is telling the truth. Now, there are people who have trained themselves somehow, some way to create the appearance that they're telling the truth. And so we can be tricked, and we can also trick ourselves. But I think we also have this innate ability to sense when someone is telling the truth. I'm live from my basement gym, by the way. Last week, I think episode 57 was live from my bedroom. So I have been recording these episodes in my basement gym, so I decided to continue that tradition this week. So as I was trying to explain, I've been working part-time at an Italian restaurant since April of 2019. I started doing that because I had one personal loan. I had some student loan debt, and then I also had a car loan for the family car that we still drive. So I started working part-time at an Italian restaurant so that the extra income that I would earn from the Italian restaurant I could flush into my personal loan and my student loan debt, and then also the car loan that I had. And so I worked there from April 2019 into November of 2020. So I think it's like 13 months. No, it can't be 13 months. 13 months would have taken me to May 2020. I mean, that way you can tell that I'm telling the truth. So it'd be April, May, June, July. Well, April to April is 12. So then May, 13, June, July, August, September, October, November. So 12 plus 7, 19 months. So the personal loan was about $6,000, and I actually paid that off in like 5 months. So from April 2019 to October 2019. And then from October 2019 to November 2020, we paid off like $15,000 worth of student loan debt. And then after that, I quit the Italian restaurant, quit there for 14 months. And then I ended up going back January of 2022. So I was gone November to November. Yeah, I was gone 14 months. And I went back because some other stuff happened. But the whole reason that I mentioned the Italian restaurant is you meet people. And one of the persons that I met is this salad lady. I get along with her real great. And one time I was talking to her and I forgot what the conversation was even about, but we started talking about I think we started talking about why you learn less as you get older. And a lot of people think that you just don't have, there's different philosophies, right? To bring that in, because this podcast is about philosophy of life and what goes under philosophy. You can talk about anything, right? So it's just an excuse to talk about anything. But so there's different philosophies on why as you get older, it's harder for you to learn. And one philosophy is that you just don't have the mental capacity anymore than as when you were younger. But she had an interesting perspective, and it has stayed with me. And as I was mentioning, I feel like we have this innate ability to tell when someone is telling the truth. So what she said at the time has just had the ring of truth to me. It just seemed to be true, and I feel like since then, um, it kind of has proven itself to be true, at least in my life. And I mean, I'm not trying to argue that what she said is subjectively or objectively true, right? I'm just trying to give you something to think about, to help you out, right? So what she said was that when we're young, we're not scared to learn because we're not scared to learn and we're not scared to try because we're more fearless. We haven't experienced the fear that comes with making a mistake. We haven't experienced the fear that comes from failure, and and that fear that comes from trying again after you fail. Because when you're young, before you fail at something, before you make a mistake, it might be your first mistake, it might be your first failure. So then after you fail and make a mistake, that's when you start feeling fear. So as you get older, that happens a lot, and sometimes that fear stunts us, it paralyzes us. So what she said, and it might have been, we might have been talking about something that had to do with my life at the time. And as I mentioned, I worked there, well, I forgot the math already, but I worked there from 2019 to 2020 and then 2022 to now. So I can't remember if it was the first time I worked there or this time, but it doesn't matter, right? It obviously had a lasting effect on me. But that just made a lot of sense to me, right? Because in my own life, I've experienced that when it's time, when it's time for me to try something new and or to learn something new, I have a fear of making a mistake, of failing, and of not being good at it. And that kind of goes against our reason. It goes against rationality. Like, of course, you're going to make a mistake when you first learn and try something because you've never done it before. Of course, you're going to fail at it because you've never done it before. And the third one, being bad at something, well, if you try something, make a mistake, and give up, of course, you're not going to be good at it. If you try something, fail, and give up, of course, you're not going to be trying to do something. But it's funny, like, we are naturally good at some things and are not naturally good at some other things. And the only way that you find out what you're naturally good at is by trying a bunch of different things, right? Like, I've mentioned before that when I started playing this Mexican genre called Duranguense when I was 15. And I started playing what's called La Tambora, which is just the Spanish version of saying bass drum, but it's a bass drum that has two hi-hat cymbals bolted to it. So you play the bass drum and the hi-hats at the same time. So that was something that I was naturally good at, right? And I also remember that when I started working at a packaging line as a packer, I was also kind of naturally good at that. There's other things that I wasn't naturally good at. So I remember when I was younger, I was on a soccer team, and I had never practiced at being a goalie, but since we were kids, it really wasn't about winning or losing the game. It was about learning how to play soccer, and it was about learning how to work as a team, and it was about developing athletic skills that you may or may not continue going. But I remember in one game, I asked if I could be the goalie, and I was completely terrible at it. Of course, I had never done it before. The coach let me try because, as I said, I might have been in the first or second grade. I can't remember that far. But I was horrible at it, sucked at it, never did it again. Could I have gotten better? Of course, but after I tried it the one time and I wasn't good at it, I kind of, in my young mind, was like, well, maybe I shouldn't ever do this again. So that was something that I wasn't naturally good at. I also tried wrestling in the seventh or eighth grade. I think it might have been the seventh grade. There's pictures of me, unfortunately. And yeah, I wasn't very good at it either. The reason I wanted to try wrestling is because as a kid, I was a fan of WCW and WWF that later became um, WWE. I think I tried watching ECW and I really wasn't that into it. So yeah, I tried wrestling in seventh grade. Did it? I actually finished the season. Wasn't terribly good at it, and then I think the next year they were having a hard time finding a coach for that. And even if they had found a coach, I think that since I wasn't good at it the previous year, I would kind of quit that. So, and then I also tried football in eighth grade, was not good at it at all. There was like one time where the coach praised me for my efforts, and then after that, I kind of sucked. I didn't even finish the season. I remember at the time in the eighth grade, um, there was this girl that I liked, and I went over her house, and her brother and I were messing around with a basketball, and in their driveway, I landed wrong on an ankle. And so I kind of used that as my excuse to not finish the football season because I wasn't naturally good at it, right? So that's three things in my life that I wasn't naturally good at, and two things that I was naturally good at. But as you get older, you kind of forget, or you're kind of blinded or stunted by the fear of making a mistake and failing at something. You kind of forget that, hey, there are some things that I'm going to be naturally good at, and there's some things that I'm not. But either way, if I keep trying after I fail or make a mistake, I can make improvement, especially if I intend to make improvement. So to go back to what I was talking, um, what I was talking about with my coworker at Lino's, is she was saying, yeah, so yeah, you kind of have to work at, um, she said, losing the fear, right? Because if you lose the fear of making a mistake or um, of failing, then you're more likely to try. And if you're more likely to try, then you're more likely to learn, and more likely, and if you learn, then you're going to improve. And like I said, that just seems true to me, and it has proven to be true in in my life. But I don't think that we can lose I mean, there are people that seem fearless, and there are people that seem to have less fear, and I don't know if that's how they would describe themselves, but I think that you can't lose. I mean, mentally, you cannot be scared, you cannot have fear, you can kind of be fearless, but fear is also an emotion. So what I think is that you have to try, and you have to intend to improve, even if you do feel fear and you do feel uh, scared. And I can give you some examples of um, how that has looked in my life, and then maybe you can kind of reflect and analyze how it looks in your life. So, and some of these are unconscious, right? Because I think that your desire and your hope to improve has to be greater than the fear that you feel, so that you can move forward anyway, even if you feel scared. So when I started lifting when I was 20 years old or 21 years old, I was scared of injuring myself. I was scared of doing an exercise, and I wasn't scared of being sore. I knew that soreness came from, lifting weights, but I was scared of like lifting weights and doing it wrong and hurting myself. So what did I do? Because I'm in my basement gym, right? I've been lifting 10, 11 years now, even though it doesn't look like I lift, right? Which is a separate conversation. I only lift now to work on my weak points, which is my entire body. So what did I do? So lifting weights is actually one of the few things that I've been able to learn on YouTube. So, but why did I do that? Because my desire to learn how to do the lifts properly with proper form and technique, and my desire to get bigger and stronger, and my desire to achieve the physique that I wanted to have, or at least, even if I never achieve it, at least get as close as possible. That desire was greater than the fear of injuring myself. And I also knew that the more videos that I watched, um, and the more I tried to perform the exercise correctly, the closer I would get to actually performing that exercise correctly. And I was right about both things. I've actually have injured myself, and I have, but the amount of times that I've injured myself is way less than I thought it would be, and it's also way less than the amount of times that I've actually performed an exercise correctly. I think over the 10, 11 years that I've been lifting, the biggest injury that I've had actually happened last year, right here in my basement gym while I was squatting. And the more I think about it, I'm not sure why I injured myself. I mean, it had to have, I might have just not braced my core um, correctly. But the point is that my desire to learn how to lift was greater than the fear I had of injuring myself. And if I had never acted upon that desire, I would have never learned how to lift, and I would have never found this recreation that has become a part of my um, that has become a part of my lifestyle. And the other example that I the other example that I have is, as I mentioned, when I was 15, I started playing in a Duranguense, and so I did that. And then after that, I did that when I was 15. And then by the time that I was 16, I switched bands, and it was a different genre. It's called tamborazo. So I did that. And then by the time that I was 17, I switched bands again, and that one's called banda. Now, when I joined the banda, the last band that I was in, I remember that they invited me to join the group. They invited me to join the band, and I was scared because I remember asking them, "How much time are you going to give me to learn, a majority of the songs that you guys play?" And I remember they said, "What are you talking about? If you want to join us, then you're just going to join us, and you're going to just start playing at the gigs, and then um, you'll come and practice with us when we have practice, but there isn't this transition period to where we have the old guy playing, and then you come to practice and you learn a bunch of stuff." And then so that I was scared, because I was like, well, man, like, because we were getting paid to play. So I was like, man, what if I'm on stage and I mess up a song? And I did. That actually did happen. Um, but my desire to play this instrument, and my desire to be part of the band, and my desire to do it was greater than the fear. And I ended up joining, and I did end up making a bunch of mistakes, and I did end up embarrassing myself a bunch of times, but eventually I got better, and I had a great time, and that's something that I've talked about on this podcast on the Dani Flow podcast before, that I want to get back to doing someday, even if I'm like 40, 50, 60, 70 or whatever. It's just something that I love to do. So it's something that's in the back burner, that I shouldn't have gave up, right? um but that's a different episode. So that's another example of something that I was scared to do. And yeah, as I've gotten older, it is scary to learn new things because we just want to go in to something and be good at it right away. And if we're not good at a way, I think it hurts our confidence, it hurts our identity, all these different things. But it's funny, I guess we just have bad memory, like, because um of course I'm not doing everything that I've ever tried, but most things that I've tried, even if I didn't end up being great at it or being a master at it or whatever, I have been able to make improvements, even if I've made mistakes and have failed along the way. And ultimately, you don't fail at something until you quit at it. And it's okay to quit at things if they're just not for you. Like, I don't regret quitting soccer when I was a kid. Like, I'm just not a guy that's into sports. Like, I don't regret quitting wrestling. I don't regret uh, quitting football. Um, I do regret quitting the uh, the banda. I think I should have just kept doing that uh, on the side. Um, and like this podcast, right? Like, I thought about starting a podcast for a long time, and I just didn't do it because I was scared to suck at it. And maybe I do suck at it, but I've obviously been able to make some in some improvements as far as like um, like it's hard for me to come up with the input. Maybe you should let me know how this podcast has improved. But um, even if this podcast isn't where I want it to be, as long as I don't quit it, then I haven't ultimately failed um, at it. So yeah, the takeaway, if there is a takeaway, is I think it's true that the older that we get, because we've experienced fear, failure, and making mistakes, it can stunt and paralyze our our growth. So, and I don't think we can get rid of it. I just think that we need to learn to still do it scared and still do it with whatever amount of fear. We just have to recognize that it's just a feeling, and feelings are part of being human. And we've been scared before, and we've still tried stuff before, and we have been able to make improvements. Like, the last example that I can give you is, right now I still work at the Italian restaurant part-time, but right now I'm a full-time screen printer. A year ago, 13 months ago, I had never screen printed in my life. I was scared to try it and mess up. And as recently, not as early, but as recently as December, so that was like 4 months ago, every order that I was screen printing, I was making mistakes on. And I remember getting frustrated with myself. And I remember um, thinking that maybe screen printing, maybe I'm just not good at screen printing, right? But even since then, 4 months ago to now, I have made some small improvements. So I didn't let that get in the way of, you know, making it here. So that's what I do full time. That's what I see myself doing full time for the foreseeable future, for the short-term future. And from now until the day that I stop doing it, I can keep making improvements. And I've made improvements even though I was scared to make mistakes and fail. And I have made mistakes and I have failed at it before. So I just think that whatever you want to try it, even if you're scared, and try to remember the things that you've have improved at, and that you improved at them even while being scared. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So that's this week's episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you've made it this far without liking it, make sure you like it, and make sure you share this episode if this episode hasn't helped you. I'm sorry, right? Because the point of the episode is to help you. So if it has helped you, right, it's at least supposed to make you reflect, make you think, right? That's what we're all about, thinking on the Dani Flow podcast. So if it has helped you, make sure to share it. If you're watching on YouTube, leave me a comment. Turn on notifications, not just on YouTube, but on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify or wherever you're listening to. And I'll see you in episode 59. Until then, remember what Fulton Sheen taught us: your life is worth living. I never know how to end this, so this is done.